Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning to those of you who are coming in from Western Australia. Welcome to the Online Shop Platforms webinar today. Now, today's webinar is designed to be an interactive one where we spend a bit of time talking about each other's scenarios, learning about the different shop platforms and what might be best suited to your current situation. So you'll see you've probably used Zoom before. It's been such a big mainstay of the COVID environment, but you'll see in the webinar platform, you don't have your video on display. So it doesn't matter if you're in your jammies today, we can't see you. And that's just because today's Zoom is a webinar format and not a meeting format. So don't panic if you don't have your video working right now. It's actually by design as part of the webinar platform. But we would still love to have some interaction from everyone today. So if you have a look at the bottom of your Zoom controls, you'll see there's two ways you can interact with me. Number one is you can use the chat feature. I'm quite good at reading chat while delivering a webinar. So I encourage you to please get chatty with each other and with me as well, because I would love to see and hear more about your businesses so I can tailor this webinar on the fly to the different scenarios from the attendees that we have today. There's also a formal question and answer function. So you can use that as well. It's listed as Q&A down below. So if you would like to do that, I get a message to say, hey, this person has a question, and I can document all of those questions and answers to make sure I answer all of those throughout the webinar. So please feel free to use either one of those. I would love you to put in chat right now what kind of business you have and what you would like to sell online. So if you can just take a moment now to pop down in the chat what kind of business you have and what kind of products you're going to sell online. Or maybe you're already selling products online and you would like to find out a little more about the other platforms that are available. So today, because we have an hour, I have picked 4 of the most popular platforms to talk through. And so I'm just going to share my screen right now so you can see which ones we're going to be talking about. So hold tight and I'll just pop that on screen. And so these are the 4 major most popular platforms. And I've picked them because most of the people who attend these workshops tend to be small businesses, and these are the ones that small businesses tend to choose. Honestly, there's probably about maybe 10 major current platforms available and 100 more fairly popular platforms, but we just don't have time to talk about them all. So I've picked these for different reasons, and they are increasing in complexity. So we're going to start with Wix, then Shopify, WooCommerce, and Magento. And if you have a question about any one of these at any time, please pop it down in the chat. If we find something that maybe we could explore further with everybody, I can actually allow people to talk. So I can unmute you and we can have a bit of a discussion, but we can't see you in this session though. So that is a bit of a disadvantage to the webinar platform. I can see already I've got some really good answers here. I can see that Mark and Susan are here from Iconic Colors, and I love that they've popped their domain name into the chat so we can all actually go and have a look at what they're up to and what they sell. So they're doing an online store selling gift books, fine art and print. So that's very well suited to the online environment. G's here to just explore some options. We've got Mel from Patchwork Pattern Designs. And so she's going to start a retail store importing Indian cushions and quilts. And Susan has a Wix website already. So thank you all for already starting to contribute and talk through how your business works. And I'll try to include some examples for all of you as we go along. So the first one we're going to kick off with is Wix, the world of Wix. And some people have already said that they have a Wix website. I'm going to stop the share now because I think it's so much more interesting if we can see each other and we talk that way rather than giving you a death by PowerPoint kind of experience today. I would say that when it comes to Wix, Wix has provided a very trendy online advertising kind of space where they advertise just about everywhere that they do stunning websites, they're free, and they have no coding knowledge required. I think that this is the big carrot. We often see their ads with celebrities. They're kind of glossy, quick videos, and they show on screen just how easy they are to build. And so that's really been great for anybody who is a startup business. They're looking for something quick, cheap, and they have some time to be able to craft their own, or maybe the inclination. So I think if you're not so tech savvy, building your own website, even on Wix, is not that exciting for you. That's probably how you would not like to spend your weekend. But if you do like to tinker and you're a little bit creative, Wix is definitely a very easy way to build a website. I think it's much like how you might build a document in Word, or maybe you create a PowerPoint presentation. It's got that same kind of drag and droppy feel. Now, of course, no platform is perfect. So when it comes to Wix, I won't say that it is too good to be true, but it definitely has its limitations. So let's talk about the advantages first. Number one, Wix has tons of amazing themes. And we'll see this as a feature as we go through the other platforms as well, is the theme is important because it is what determines how your website looks. And although many of the platforms allow you to build a website from scratch, and in fact, the more pro versions, that's usually what you would do, I think it is very much a time-saving maneuver to just use an existing theme. So I think it's also much easier to tinker with somebody who's already set up that theme. They've put good graphic design concepts into creating it in the first place. And so for the purposes of this, the theme is how the website looks, the design of it, the layout, what you can see on screen. And Wix does have the advantage that some of the others don't, that when you install the theme, you get how it looks. Well, I'll make that a little more clear when we talk about WooCommerce a bit later, but basically you install the theme, it looks exactly like that, and then you change it out for your own photos or your own text, and you customize it to your color themer. So that's the first massive advantage with Wix, is there's so many free themes and they genuinely look stunning. They are well built. So first thing up. I also think it is really simple to set up a Wix website, and it's really simple to use. They don't sort of hide features, and they don't put things in strange or unintuitive places. I can see in the chat that Susan already has a Wix website. So Susan, I would love to hear from you about your opinion of using Wix as maybe a non-technical person. Me as a technical person, I tend to look at things a little bit different, but I would love to hear what your opinion is and share with everybody how easy you've found Wix to use before. And Wix is also great because they have on-page support. So you can get helpful hints and tips at any stage where you are, and their help system is actually built fairly well. In a little bit, I'll show you some examples of some Wix websites, and one of them is, the first one I've got up actually, is somebody who has been consulting with me in the ASBAS program, and they have an online store as part of their Wix setup. So I'll show you their website so you can see the kind of color of a business who would usually use Wix and what they've produced. I would say, even though it is easy to set up and there are great themes, sometimes it's really useful to have a graphic designer on side to help you craft your brand. I do find if you're not really a creative or a graphicsy kinds of person, you might still play with that theme in such a way that it doesn't look amazing. Maybe you might use colors that are too bright, for example, to try and draw attention to something. And what happens then is it might just look busy or gaudy. So I think it is still really useful to have somebody in your business that helps you with graphic related things if you're not that kind of person. Let me talk through the parts of Wix that I don't love. So number one is it has been fighting its bad reputation with SEO for a really long time. So if you're not that familiar with what SEO is, it stands for search engine optimization. And it is literally Google looking at your website and deciding how you will rank inside its engine. And Wix has made improvements in this area because honestly, they were copping a lot of heat in the media about just how awful their SEO capabilities were. And so they definitely have improved in this way, but it still tests poorly compared to all the other platforms we're talking about today. So I think that's the first consideration, is if you are going to have the kind of business where you are relying on free traffic from Google, that is people finding you for keywords that they're searching for, then Wix probably isn't the best option for you, because out of the box, it has technical humps that it puts in front of Google, even if you do all of the right things. So all of the right things being writing fantastic product descriptions, which go into a lot of detail, having a good spread of photos and describing those photos well, and having a great structure to your website so Google can find all of your text really easily. Even if you're doing those things well, Wix will still put, a bit of technical hump in front of Google, and so you won't get as good a rankings as you would if you had the same thing on one of the other platforms. I can see that Susan has said, yeah, Wix is pretty easy. So thanks so much for siding with me on that, Susan. And you can talk to the Wix team when you're stuck as well, which is a great advantage. And I've had to talk to them, and they were amazingly friendly when I spoke to them as well, which I think makes a bit of a difference. Many of the Wix websites I've had a look at are also not secured, so they don't operate in the secure site protocol. So you might have seen HTTPS, the S stands for secure. And this is a problem these days because people look towards a secure site. Google Chrome gives you an error if you go to a non-secure website. It gives you a bit of a warning, and it gets grumpy about it. And we know that Google overwhelmingly preference secure sites now when they're creating their index. So for this reason, I think it is also tricky to change it over. So I think that's definitely in the con section for me. And the third thing is that as far as a robust kind of shop platform, it definitely lacks marketing features and integrations with other things. It's designed to be a basic shop. And honestly, they started with a web builder. That's what they did well, is create a good, easy platform to build a website. And the shop has been added on. It hasn't been built from the ground up with the idea of online shopping. And so I think Wix, from that perspective, isn't that great of a solution unless you've only got a couple of products. Those products are really simple, and you don't have to do lots of high-end crazy integration. So I won't go into a lot of detail about that, but some of the platforms do perform a lot better when you want to integrate with something. So as a really good example, you probably can't integrate with most POS systems in Australia. So if you use your POS system in a retail store for managing your stock and for describing your stock, Wix just doesn't have the capability to integrate with that and show those products on screen in a good way. There's a chance it might, like it does have some integrations, but most of the ones that I've seen that our customers are using here just can't integrate with Wix. So for that reason, I've delegated it to the quick, simple, easy for a good looking website. Okay for simple kind of shops. Not that great if you're going to have a big shop and is quite robust and you want to sell a lot of things. It does have a pretty attractive price tag. So I will say, from a costing perspective, you can set up a Wix site for free. It won't operate on your own domain though. It'll be like Wix site / Nicky's Awesome Indian Cushions, something like that. So that's what the free site does. When you have a paid Wix website, you can put a domain name on it. So the paid site is somewhere between $20 to $35 a month, depending on what kind of features you get. Now, of course, all of these platforms are in US dollars. So we also have that extra little hump in that we have to do a conversion from US dollars into Australian. I would love to hear if anyone has any questions about Wix. So pop down the bottom into the chat platform. Tell me if you have a question about Wix. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a couple of examples of Wix websites now, so you can have a little look at them and get a bit of a feel for what I was mentioning earlier, where you might be able to use their templates, but perhaps without an in-house graphic designer, or maybe an outsourced graphic designer even, you don't necessarily get a beautifully polished professional result. So I'm just bringing those up now. Hold on just a second. And I'm going to now share my screen so you can see them. So this is the first one I wanted to share with you. And straight up, you can see it's got this pop-up trying to encourage you to sign up. I passionately dislike these pop-ups, but they are unfortunately really effective in the e-commerce world for taking people onto your database and therefore marketing them to them after that. And that's what it's been effective for here. So this particular customer, they are a farmer based here in North Queensland, and they grow chia seeds, and they've recently produced some very bright packaging to go with their chia seeds. So this purple and green kind of look, that reflects what their packaging looks like. And you can see that they actually only sell 2 products. They have white chia and black chia, and they come in different sizes. So in terms of a simple kind of a website, there's not that much going on here. If we jump on into the product so we can have a look. So you can see you can only buy a couple of different sizes of white chia. And so from an online kind of store perspective, this looks okay. How big we're getting, and add to the cart. So that's the whole process for this one. And I think for this kind of a business, you know, it was quick and easy for them to set up, and it's quick and easy for their customers to be able to use. So this is exactly the kind of business that can work well on Wix. Let's go to another one. This is one that I found operating out of the US. So it's a company that sells hip hop jewelry, which is a little bit different. This is a much more robust size store. So if you have a look here, you'll see that they sell a lot of stuff, not that many categories. So if we were to jump into one of their sections, the thumbnails look good. I think the setup looks okay. They've also taken some fairly good product photos. So you can see that they've put good effort into setting up their store. And it definitely has a professional element to it. Like, I think I could trust this website to make a purchase. You just add it to your bag and go. So I think this one's okay. And then the last one I wanted to show you is a candle company, which has quite a significant number of products. So this is how one looks with quite a large number, but also I think this is a good example of someone who perhaps isn't that creative in-house, but has spent money crafting a really nice brand. So you can see their labels look really nice, their logo's lovely, they've got a good color scheme, but then this ghastly kind of text looks like it's completely off-brand with the gradient and things. I think that's the risk with doing things on a self-made platform like Wix, is it's really easy to gallop off into a direction that isn't brand compliant and then brings down the credibility of your overall product as a result. So there's 3. I think it could be very, very useful for the kind of business that is starting out and needs to do things quickly and cheaply. So that's what it really could be great for. Any questions about Wix? I have none coming up. So let's move on to our next offender, which is one of the biggest things in e-commerce right now, which is Shopify. And the reason why I wanted to cover Shopify is because it has had meteoric growth. It started as just a little nugget. It was built for purpose out of the box, specifically for people to set up an online store quickly. And that's really what it's great at. It's not that great if you want to have a website which doesn't sell stuff. Its website features just aren't that robust. But from the perspective of being able to start a store and by the end of the weekend selling products, that's what Shopify is amazing at. Let me talk through some of the great things that I think it does and some of the not so great things. So out of all of the e-commerce platforms, Shopify tests the best for fast load time. And why that's important is because number 1, it's a Google SEO trigger. Number 2, customers hate slow websites. They will notoriously just completely disconnect from a website that loads too slow. And in that case, you know, I don't think a slow website is a great website, especially from the perspective of purchasing. I've once been in the middle of a transaction and the website has slowed down. I thought it was broken. I redid my transaction and then suddenly I've spent twice. So load time can be really important, especially at that critical juncture of people giving you their credit card. So I think that's where the load time is really important. Also, who wants to sit around and wait? I think the world of the worldwide wait is definitely over. Our internet's much faster than it once was. And so poor load speed really is a bad reflection of your business these days. I have a question from Susan about which website would you go to check to see whether a business is using Wix or something else? And it's a really good question, actually. It can be kind of tricky. In the case of Wix, usually at the bottom of a website, it says powered by Wix. So by default, Wix puts that on every website it builds. And so you have to specifically go and turn that off if you don't want that to be displayed. And most people don't, you know, it's designed to be simple. Most people aren't savvy enough to go, oh, I don't really want that powered by Wix at the bottom. They just leave it there. So in the case of Wix, it's pretty easy to see whether or not something is built on that platform over one of the others. Sometimes they hide it though. I use a tool called BuiltWith. It's builtwith.com. I'll pop it into the chat so that you can use it too, because you can identify any platforms, but also you can identify extensions and all of those sorts of things as well. So things that technology under the hood that you wouldn't normally be able to see. In my case, I usually just look at the code and I know what all the code structures look like, so I can pretty quickly figure out which one is which. But BuiltWith will be able to tell you the same kind of data as someone looking at the code and in a much better format anyway. Susan's also asked a question around having lots of pictures. What kind of things can you do to make it smaller to help with that site load speed? So in your case, Susan, what I would do is resize those photos before you upload them to be just the biggest that you need. And for most people, it's somewhere around the 1,000 pixel kind of mark. So if you've got photos that are click to zoom, perhaps that's when you want them larger. Maybe some photos are much smaller, but that's how you can help that. Most image editing software has the capability to do a resize and can control how big it should go. I use a really quick editor that's free called FastStone. I'll just type that into the chat for you. And I use that a fair bit because it's very fast. It opens, it doesn't have many controls. And so if I'm going to resize photos, you can even resize a large number of them quite quickly. I use that. If you edit in maybe Photoshop, if you're a more kind of pro user, you can do it in there as well. If you pop into the chat what you use to edit your photos with, or maybe you don't edit your photos, I can give you some guidance there. But if you don't use anything at the moment, then FastStone is definitely a great choice because it is super fast. It was built by a programmer to do not much else other than photo resizing and cropping. So definitely built for purpose. Back to Shopify. Shopify is a super easy setup. And that's really where it kicks goals over every other platform. From a shop perspective, it's much faster and easier to set up Wix. And you can also use this thing called one-click selling inside Shopify. So one-click selling is where someone can buy just on a single click. So it dramatically increases your sales because of how fast it operates. So people just don't like going through the rigmarole of setting up an account and putting in all the details and stuff. So one-click selling allows you to make the customer experience much faster. Shopify also is fairly customizable. So if you know what you're doing, you can tinker with the themes pretty well and you can create a fairly polished performance. Susan, you've asked, how do you spell it? FastStone. It's just up a little bit. Oh, sorry, I've sent it to the wrong thing. Hold on a second. There we go. Now I've put it into the right chat. And also that BuiltWith that I popped in earlier, I'll pop that in there as well. So FastStone and BuiltWith. Shopify also has this really massive advantage if you want to expand significantly. And what it does is it integrates with Amazon. When it announced their partnership with Amazon, there definitely was a lot of excitement about it. So what that means is that you can directly integrate into Amazon's platform from your Shopify store. And I think this is a big advantage, especially if you want to have a more global audience. So you literally just set up to sell on Amazon and manage all of that from within the Shopify platform. I think it's a feature that people wished was around a long time ago. And it definitely really upped the game of where Shopify is. In terms of costing, let's talk about that. So from a small site to an advanced site, Shopify starts at 30 US a month, but you can definitely hook up to more than 300 a month very quickly. And it does work with a lot of different kind of payment processes. So you might want to integrate with, I don't know, say PayPal or maybe Afterpay or things like that. There's a lot of different ways that you can take people's money, and I think that's a really good thing. So yeah, the Shopify platform has 3 different levels, I guess, with different kinds of features. So $29.79 and $2.99. I do think that Shopify is a little underwhelming in terms of its feature set out of the box though. So if you get the Shopify Basic, for example, so you're paying $30 a month US, you don't get those one-click upsells. You don't get kind of personalized products or product search or SEO tools, or there's quite a lot of things that you can't do. And a lot of businesses I work with want to have subscription or recurring kinds of products. You can't do that on any of the platforms without an extension. And so that really brings me to the next major theme that will continue through a lot of the other platforms now, is that you have the core software. It's a bit like buying an iPhone. And then you can add features onto that, which is a bit like buying an app. And so the app you buy might be so that you can take ticket sales on your website. It might be so that you can have recurring membership fees, for example. So all of these extensions extend the product functionality of the basic cart. And that's really my criticism with Shopify. Out of the box, it doesn't have a lot of things that I think it really should have, but you can purchase those things as an extension. All of the extensions tend to have a monthly or a yearly fee, so you are dramatically adding bloat to how much you spend on it per month or per year. So that's a real consideration with Shopify. Now, we have a question from ASBAS, actually. Welcome, ASBAS. Are Shopify sites relatively faster to use for customers? And the answer is no, they are marginally slower. So that's because one of the cons of the Shopify platform is it doesn't perform amazingly well in speed tests. I don't think it's a deal breaker though. I think if you are looking for something that's genuinely easy to set up and you're getting started in e-commerce, this would be the platform that I would use. It's definitely robust enough that you can have a pretty good store, especially if you're going to be integrating with Amazon. So I don't think the speed issues are significant enough to stop you from using it, especially if you are on a tight budget and you don't really have a development budget to spend. You don't have the budget to engage a web developer to build the website for you, then this is the platform that I would use. And interestingly, if you then did okay and you wanted to expand it further, you could engage a developer to use this platform. There's enough people out there in the wilderness who've used Shopify that you can expand it dramatically and give it a more professional look with a solid development team. So that's a big advantage. Now I'm going to pop up a couple of Shopify sites for you. Some are surprising. So I've actually found 3 big brands that use Shopify. So while I'm doing that, please put down in your chat if you have any questions about I just see a question from Mel about Shopify being the best for load time. Yes, you're right. I just mixed up Shopify and Wix. Thank you for picking it up. So yeah, there's no disadvantage. Sorry about that. Brain fart moment, I think. Maybe not enough coffee today. I'm going to blame it on that. And so yeah, pop any questions you have about Shopify down in the panel below, the chat panel below, and I'll bring up a couple of these sites to share with you. One of them involves alcohol, which I thought was a good addition today. And I'll show you why in just a second. Alrighty. So the first one I'm going to share with you is if you've been ever curious about buying an electric car, you've probably checked out Tesla before. And this website is actually a Shopify website. And it's a fairly good looking website, I think. It does have some cool modern features. It integrates a little bit of video. I'm not sure how well that video will come across on Zoom, but it's a car driving, and it's a fairly good drone kind of video. It's a very clean style, so they've obviously chosen something well to integrate with Shopify. I think it's a fairly solid looking website. And whoever thought that you might actually be able to buy a car online? I think that's a pretty amazing purchase to pop onto your credit card, especially the prices that Tesla have. So yeah, the Tesla website was a big surprise to me when I found out that it was using Shopify. Another one that was a surprise is Red Bull. And so Red Bull being a fairly massive global company, all these websites are interesting because they're not just about product sales. They have a fairly good amount of product support information through the website. And so if you want to check out their purchasing section, you run through their products and you see it looks a little bit differently, but it still works well on the Shopify platform. So I think they've done really well with how they've customized it. And then last, we've got Bud. And the reason why I wanted to show you Budweiser is because when you go into it for the first time, like all alcohol websites, it has that pop-up to check that you are of age to actually look at alcohol-related things. And I thought that the way they did their pop-up was really good. So Budweiser is the third Shopify site that I would love you to go and check out. Is anyone on the call today, does anybody use Shopify as their platform? Because I would love to have a look at yours as well, if you've got one. And we don't have any questions about Shopify. So I'll move on to the third section, which I think is the most popular one around the world by a very long way, and that is WooCommerce. And the reason why WooCommerce is the most popular is just for the sheer volume of the number of people who use WordPress. So if you are going to be using WordPress for your website, chances are you would probably be picking this plugin to drive your website. WordPress is definitely king when it comes to content and to SEO. And I've seen an experiment that somebody did to move their shop from WooCommerce over to Shopify and then back to WooCommerce for SEO purposes. And they said WooCommerce was definitely the best platform for SEO for their website. It also is, up until recently, felt a little bit clunky, but it's definitely come a long way, especially when comparing to a platform like Shopify and the fourth one we're going to talk about, Magento as well. So from that perspective, I think if you are already using WordPress for your website, which apparently WordPress drives about 33% of the internet, so it would definitely be the right choice for you because it's quick and simple to add on as a plugin. So a bit like that extension system, you can extend WordPress with a plugin and you can extend WooCommerce with extensions, which yeah, it's not that confusing at all. It also has that one-click selling app available. So if you are interested in making it easy for your customer, because that's such a big thing in e-commerce, you know, that's available through the WooCommerce system as well. And the other advantage is because that WordPress is just so broadly used, there are a lot of WordPress experts out there in the world. So it's really easy to find someone who is good at WordPress, good at WooCommerce, and doesn't cost the earth as a developer. I would say though, the cons of WooCommerce is it's not nearly as easy as those other two platforms we've talked about out of the box to set things up. And it doesn't work in the same way. So those two are hosted platforms. So you have a website on Wix or you have a website on Shopify. They're not platforms which you choose to host yourself. If you divorce Wix, you have to go create a new website. You can't transfer it off. Same with Shopify. Whereas WooCommerce, if you divorce one of your web developers, you can just shift it to another developer without any kind of repercussions. So from that perspective, it's transportable. It is your own. WooCommerce is open source software. So it's completely free. Same as WordPress, completely free. The whole open source idea is that software should be available to everybody. And so they are community developed. Sometimes that means you can find an annoying bug that you can't fix because there's just nobody there to go and fix it. You know, it has to be a feature that the entire community wants solved. And so a programmer will then create a bug fix to that and then integrate it back into the open source software. So sometimes it can be a bit of a pain in the bum. Is anybody using WordPress already? Please pop into the chat and let me know. Yeah, what are you already using for your software? And if WooCommerce is on your agenda. Heather, I see you've got a hand up. How can I help? If you want to pop into the chat your question or pop into the Q&A. Oh no, your hand's down now. Awesome, sorry, all good. So from a pricing perspective, WooCommerce is the cheapest, but, big but, you need to host your website. And the cost of hosting your website is pretty similar to what the cost of both Wix and Shopify is. So from a pricing perspective, I think they all even out in the wash so far, except for the fact that you probably would need a developer to do the work for you on WooCommerce, unless you're really savvy yourself. ASBAS has asked, with these 4 options, how important is it to have ongoing support and to pay for it? So I think with both Wix and Shopify, not that important. The main reason is because you have a fairly good community inside both of those platforms that you can lean on. There's help staff, you know, they're paid platforms, so you can get help if you need it. You already pay for it as part of the structure of having those sites. In the case of WooCommerce, I think it is reasonably important to have a developer on side, but this is the first platform that I would consider a pro level. So if you've already had an e-commerce site and you're moving on to something else, you need more functionality than what you've already had, this would probably be your choice, unless you were growing dramatically and doing something really big and scary, in which case Magento would be your answer. So I think for WooCommerce and Magento, paying someone for ongoing support is important. You may not necessarily have to pay per month though. You might just be able to find an expert that you can call and get ad hoc consultation with from time to time. So I would only pay for the support if you're using it. Maybe try ad hoc first and then ongoing if you're a more power user. Mel said that she has started to build her site on WooCommerce and doesn't find it user-friendly at all. And I agree with you, it's definitely not a user-friendly platform. I think it's really best as a pro platform to work with a web developer on. So yeah, I agree with you exactly. Yeah, that it's not the best. I think it's important though that you identify what is your business model and what's your store size. So if you had, you know, maybe 10,000 products, I wouldn't be starting with Shopify. That's a significant online store. And chances are you have complexity to those products that you need to be able to reflect in your platform. And so WooCommerce would be the best one to be able to do that. We have a question from Simon. Which platform would be best for retail and wholesale selling? I would say best would be WooCommerce. Second best would probably be Magento. It would actually be the first if it was easier to use, but it's not. It's big and complicated. So I think, yeah, WooCommerce would be the best. People have told me that Shopify does an okay job of this, especially in the world of affiliates. I've just never worked on one before. So I would explore that platform, especially if you're starting out for the first time. Wholesale and retail can be really tricky to get right because you don't want to display your wholesale pricing accidentally to retailers, and you want your wholesalers to sign up and log in before they can see their pricing. And sometimes wholesale pricing isn't automatically discounted. It might be very structured and linear as to how you discount for wholesalers. So yeah, I would start with WooCommerce as the best option. Our ASBAS person has asked about the user friendliness. Is WooCommerce user-friendly, not user-friendly for customers or for us as business owners? And it's definitely us for business owners. From the perspective of a customer, all 4 of these platforms are almost indifferent. There are some subtle changes, but from a customer perspective, any one of them would get you a pretty good website, and none of them will hinder your sales in any way. So yeah, I think from that perspective, it's only for us as business owners in the setup time. I would love Mel to share a couple of her frustrations in the chat if she could, so that everyone else can see what those frustrations were. some of the things that I think, well, one of the reasons why I think WooCommerce is really amazing, honestly, is because of that SEO. Is that if most e-commerce websites really do rely on traffic from Google, most of them think that maybe social might be a major part of their incoming traffic, but in fact, social doesn't translate into e-commerce traffic that well. I do think this might be about to change. And the reason why is because Facebook is experimenting with having an online shop platform right now. They haven't launched it in Australia yet. It's only available to some US merchants. And I think once that happens, things might be a little bit different. So Facebook at the moment, you can have a shop, but it's really just a catalog of photos that link over to your website. Soon we're going to see Facebook do full e-commerce and have their own shop platform in their own right. So you can do the full transaction while being inside Facebook. But at the moment, when somebody is in Facebook or in Insta, they are sticky inside that platform. They don't tend to jump out of that platform and buy something and then come back in. So usually where you will get your traffic is via Google. And if you only do Google ads to try and get your traffic, it's hideously expensive. I think the retail metric is around 1%. 1% of your traffic turns into a customer. So that's kind of the benchmark you have to work with, is if you have to pay for 100 customers to come to your site via Google ads before you get one sale, most of us don't have the kind of product margins to be able to support that advertising. So the free traffic that comes from Google is really important. And so therefore SEO is really important. And I think WooCommerce is hands down the best platform to do that. Michelle says she's written a blog for about 10 years on Blogger, which Blogger is owned by Google. And WordPress is kind of similar to Blogger. Yeah, that's definitely true. Do I think that she could do WordPress herself? Michelle, I would give it a red hot crack. If you're already familiar with that process, you're already familiar with that blogging environment, I would definitely try it. WordPress started as a blog, but it does have really good features around pages as well. And it's very customizable through its plugin process. I do think that every time you add a plugin, there is this problem that it slows down your site slightly. So I wouldn't go finding 100 plugins to use and using them all at once. I'd be very selective with the ones that you use, because every one adds a little bit of bulk to your WordPress site. But it's not a problem for someone who's built a website professionally. So they'll just choose the good plugins that you actually need rather than using one for every single thing. Our ASBAS person has said, what's the ballpark for setting up and running a WooCommerce site versus the others? I would say that if you were to get a pro website built, you're looking at somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 to get WooCommerce set up. Where you will find it to be a little bit cheaper is if you load in your own products. So generally, if you have a web developer loading in your products, they're doing a kind of copy and paste job anyway from your own data. So I wouldn't pay them to do that part, but that's what would push it closer to the 10,000, unless they're writing some kind of script to be able to import your products from another source. And WooCommerce does do that fairly well. It has a good script that you can create a spreadsheet with all of your product data and just pull them in. And that's why I think it's a really good option for those larger websites. So if you're pulling some data from your POS system, for example, and you need to pull that into the website, it's really, really good for that. So that's the kind of ballpark for somebody to build it professionally. Is somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000 is your starting price. I've seen $100,000 WooCommerce websites, but they are big websites on steroids that do a lot of things. And chances are you probably won't need that kind of robustness out of the door. So I hope that gives you enough information to think about where you get started. In the case of Shopify, you can get someone to build your Shopify website for a couple of $100s. It is a global kind of marketplace, the world of Shopify. So if you're comfortable with working with someone from a distance, you'll be able to get that quite cheaply, and if you don't want to do the work to set that up. So that's another cost consideration in terms of how much you might spend. Now, I want to show you a couple of WooCommerce websites, but chances are most of the websites that you're on most of the time when you buy stuff online is a WooCommerce website. So they just are so ubiquitous, and they have, they have a lot of penetration out there into the online world. No problem with the vote of confidence, Michelle. I think if you're a little bit tech savvy, then WooCommerce is a great platform, honestly. If you can, deal with that tech savviness, and I think if you've been blogging a long time, you could definitely start there. So this is a bookstore that belongs to Entrepreneur Magazine. Entrepreneur is a fairly major website, and they sell books on the side, which is quite interesting. So this is their WooCommerce installation, which sits on the side. So as you can see, it looks pretty similar to most other similar sites. You have product information, and in this case, they have integrated with 3 other sellers. So even though they're doing the product display here, they're actually doing the purchasing part through any of these and pushing them out to those other spaces. The reason why I wanted to show you this one is because this works pretty similarly to how someone might use WooCommerce as a quoting system rather than as a purchasing system. I've worked with quite a lot of businesses who just aren't ready to take that extra step to doing online sales, and some of the reason is because their postage is difficult. So they have large bulky items that really need to be quoted for postage. They can't use Australia Post or ship it or anything like that. And so in their case, they need to add things to a quote rather than adding them to a shopping cart. Similar kind of system if you are maybe an events company and you have tens of thousands of products, lots of product lines, but you need to customize a quote to somebody because it's based on dates and times and things like that. So anyone who doesn't want to do full e-commerce, but still kind of needs most of the features except for taking the money, WooCommerce is definitely the best solution, and that's how this one is set up. And then I picked one that's a little bit more traditional in terms of a small website, and that is a company called Picky Bars. So you can see the kind of products these are. They have fairly nice looking packaging, and you can there's a quick view feature, so you can see it small if you know what you want, or you can go through to the full product data. I also think that WooCommerce does things really well, like related items and cross-selling. The other ones do that well also, but I think that it's important that you think about if somebody is buying this thing, what else might they also buy? That whole process is very, very good for getting people to upsell themselves. And I find it very frustrating on some fashion websites. They might photograph a model wearing multiple things from their collection and they don't put that connected product in. So you're looking at buying a shirt, but you really want the pants that the lady's wearing in the photo. And you have to troll through the website trying to find what these black pants are called. And they might have, 20 different types of black pants. So have a think about that from how a customer works. Is the WooCommerce system is really great at looking after those related products. Now, do we have, Heather's asked, how can you tell which one a website is using? And a little bit further up in the chat, I'll just find it again and post it, is I use a technology called Built With. You just get the website address and you paste it in and it tells you all the technology that they're using, including WooCommerce, and also extensions that they might be using as well. So if you're wondering, how did they do that automated shipping? Then Built With can tell you that kind of data. So it's a really good piece of tech to see. It looks a bit rustic, again, built by a programmer, but super useful. Do we have any other questions about the world of WooCommerce? Nope, I got crickets in there. So let's move on to our final offender in this group of 4, and that is Magento. If anybody is an X-Men fan, they might see why I accidentally often call this Magneto. It's not much different to Magento, but the logo is like Magneto's helmet. So I often accidentally say Magneto. It took me a long time to practice. No, Magento. And you see how it's got the little registered trademark there? Well, Magento was purchased by Adobe in 2018. Adobe had its own website product for a long time, and it discontinued that product last year. And Magento is really what they've used to replace it. Now, I think Magento is the powerhouse product out of the 4 that we've discussed so far. So if you are a pro user, this would definitely be the option for you to have a most amazing website with lots and lots of integrations. Really anything is possible. It's robust, it's feature rich, it still has very strong SEO. I wouldn't say it's as good as WooCommerce necessarily, but it's very strong. Definitely has one-click selling. It has a lot of users, power users, and a fairly good community of people who use it, who are very interactive in helping developers out. Definitely scalable for very large scale and very large volume transactions. And it's flexible to choose where you want to host the software. They have their own kind of cloud system, or you can host it on your own website as well. So either one of those are okay. I think this is probably the best solution for people who have either a lot of products or a lot of tricky ways in which they deliver those products, or they're an advanced user and they've outgrown any of the other platforms that we've talked so far. There's some drawbacks though. There's some big drawbacks, in fact. And first thing is that the themes are really expensive. So compared to any of the others, they're really pricey. The software itself is easily slowed down, and it definitely requires development skills and not your average WordPress developer. So Magento needs what we call in the industry the wizards, the ones who have been around for a little while, and they really know their stuff. They sleep under the desk and drink pizza and eat beer. So they're the really hardcore programmers out there. And even the wizards, so we've done a couple of Magento websites here, they really don't like using the platform. They find it clunky, difficult, and slow to be able to do things that they find are fairly basic. So I think that's a really big inhibitor to most people. Unless you have probably about 20 grand spare, that would be the entry price for a Magento website, unless you're getting it built offshore by somebody that you trust. So it definitely has a really hefty price tag that comes with it. I've had one client who swapped to Magento, then swapped back to WooCommerce. It was way too difficult and complicated for them to use. And from a development perspective, it has virtually no support. It doesn't have the great support structure that definitely Wix and Shopify have. You can't just ring somebody and get a great answer. And it also requires a lot of space and a lot of memory on your server to perform really well. So I think this is a big business kind of bickies platform, but I wanted to mention it because I get a lot of inquiries about it. It's a respected platform. Many people see it as the industry standard for a good kind of website, a good platform. So for that reason, I think for most small businesses, it's just out of the price range. And the kind of businesses that I have as examples of who use it are things like Nike and Cisco. So really massive global brands. There is a company that I wanted to share with you though, that I was surprised when I found out that they use Magento, but it's a brand that I definitely spend a lot of time on their website because they do a lot of e-commerce things really well. And that is called Black Milk Clothing. So I'll just share that. It's a fashion website aimed specifically at young people. And some of the things that they do really cleverly is how they integrate their social media with their product range. If you saw how fast that loaded, that was blisteringly fast. So they must have a really robust server that they're working on. And like any other kind of e-commerce software, from a customer perspective, it looks and works really well. It just has so many features here. They have wish lists. They have a lot of product data. Many of their products, they load video. And they have this really cool concept here that unfortunately this product doesn't have any, but in Instagram, you can tag the company and use this hashtag, and you have a chance of being listed on this page automatically. So they actually pull the information from Instagram and put customers wearing their products up on these product pages, which is fantastic for seeing kind of live testimonials of how the product looks on someone. So I think if you were interested in having a look at a good example of a Magento website, this would definitely be the best one that I know of that isn't one of the large global kinds of companies like Nike. Procter & Gamble also are using Magento. So, and you also need such a big development team to deal with. I see that Susan's asked a question about shipping. Susan, pop your question down below. and we can have a chance at covering it in the last 5 minutes. So of the 4 platforms, let's just quickly talk them through again. Wix, fantastic for a quick, simple setup, especially for a website or very basic products. It would be good to use if you are not that graphically gifted and you need something quick and simple up. So that would be why you might choose that. Cost, pretty minimal, $25 a month if you're going to pay for your own domain, free if you're not. Number 2, Shopify, the best platform for a quick setup. You can be selling products, they say in a day, I reckon in a weekend. They still have pretty good product themes as well. I would say not as stunning as Wix, but they definitely have good product themes. So that one, its big advantage is it's fast for you to set up as a business owner. WooCommerce, the most popular in the world, has very robust enterprise level features, but you probably need a web developer to set it up unless you're already quite technically minded. Can be expandable easily with extensions, and WordPress and WooCommerce are both free, so you're only paying for your shipping. For your extensions. I just saw Susan's popped in her question about shipping, and that is that how does it work with Australia Post? Let me just come to that in a second, Susan. And then lastly, Magento, for serious e-commerce users. If you're going to be making a major splash in e-commerce, this is the right solution for you, but you need a solid development team to do it. So in terms of development costs, Wix, nothing. Shopify, probably nothing unless you need some help. WooCommerce, probably 5,000 to 10,000 if you want someone to set it up for you, but you can still give it a crack if you're technically minded. Magento, even I wouldn't try to set it up. You're probably looking at minimum 20,000 to set that up. We have done one for around 10,000, but it was a big struggle to get it within that budget. So yeah, in that case, I wouldn't enter it without a really big budget. Susan, your question around Australia Post, all of them have integrations and extensions that work with Aussie Post, so no issue there. Just depends on how you're using Aussie Post. They have a pretty good calculation method, and I think Aussie Post realised just how great e-commerce is for their business. So yeah, you'll be able to integrate with them without any kind of problem. Each of them have their own extension or plugin or way of doing that. And Simon has asked, do I offer any one-on-one consultations? So through the program that you've booked this through, the ASBAS program, you can chat to me. I think our initial conversations are only $44 and then $66 thereafter. And you can book automatically through the calendar app that works within the Adams platform through Business Station. So yeah, absolutely. If you'd like to talk through this further, I would love to help you. Next week, we are going to be talking about marketplaces. So today we talked about platforms as to what kind of software you might choose to build your website on. And next week, we're going to be talking about Etsy versus eBay versus Amazon, and maybe a couple of others as well. And they're a different kind of space, because when you build your own website, it's like having your own store that you're driving traffic to. The marketplaces have their own traffic already. So it's a bit more like being inside a shopping center. You're already getting people walking past. And so they're a good platform if SEO is not really as important to you, because the traffic is already there and you're already paying for it as part of the platform. So if you have any more questions, I have time for just one more question before we have to log off today. But thank you for so much for being part of this. I do find that when you are talking through 4 platforms, you'll probably go, oh yeah, that one's probably the right one for me. Or another one's like, maybe that one's okay. And the other ones are just too boring. So thank you for sticking with me for the 4 e-commerce platforms today. And perhaps I will see you next week for the marketplace webinar. See you then. Thanks for coming.